of the BioHub. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Lisa DiPaolo, who serves as EVP and Chief Human Resource Officer at Karyopharm Therapeutics. Lisa brings a wealth of experience, having built her career across some of the most influential names in the industry, including Ipsen, Biogen, Smiths Medical, and Novartis. And Lisa has consistently stepped into organizations at pivotal moments, whether during rapid growth, integration, or transformation, and has built HR strategies that fuel long-term success. So Lisa, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. So look, let's start off with a little bit about you then. So can you talk us through your journey in biotech, and were there any specific mentors or role models who influenced your professional journey?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So altogether, I bring around 30 years of HR experiences, primarily in the life sciences industry. You named some of the companies where I worked, but earlier in my career, I also worked at UPS and Hertz. But I consider my true launch into my life sciences career at Novartis. And so there I had several roles, including supporting a major commercial expansion, serving chief of staff to the CHRO, supporting corporate teams in the New York office, a secondment to Switzerland, transforming a business unit, as well as establishing and leading HR for a new vaccines and diagnostics division in Boston. So really great 10-year run at Novartis. And following Novartis, I led HR efforts through growth, CEO transitions, cultural transformation, in-house executive search, M&A activity at Biogen and Ipsen. And at Ipsen, I was really brought in there to build a $20 million global hub to really strengthen the employer brand and, really build a presence within the biotech ecosystem. I also led talent acquisition, executive search, which delivered, a significant amount of savings. I oversaw post-merger integrations, et cetera. I also had spent time supporting the global R&D organization at Ipsen, which was going through a major transformation. So in that capacity, establishing centers of excellence, upskilling capabilities, and really addressing, the overall structure and the way the organization was working, and obviously the culture. So after a great 5 years there, I joined Karyopharm in September of 22, where I was really following the CEO of North America, Ipsen North America. And so obviously following the CEO, it's like putting on an old pair of jeans, right? Like very comfortable, each other. But I was really drawn also by the fact that we have such a strong mission to defeat cancer and the opportunity to really shape a high impact, purpose-driven culture. So that was really what drew me here. And I guess I would say, having said all that, over the course of my career, I would say there may be the two people that really stick out as having significantly influenced and shaping my career. The first was a global business leader I worked with at Novartis. He was a Swedish executive named Mats. He taught me what it truly means to be a leader and to lead with strength, to have courage of your convictions, staying grounded in smart business decisions, really while owning your perspective. And there's two pieces of advice he gave me that still stick out to this day. He always said, don't over-explain and don't over-apologize. And so those really stuck with me. So he was very influential in my career. And I would say another person in my career was a CHRO that I worked for. His name was Ken. And Ken was intense and super smart, sharp. He could be tough. He showed me how to lead with both precision and humanity. He had a no-nonsense kind of clear view of business strategy, but he never lost sight of the people at the center of it, so that balance, being tough-minded, making tough decisions while being deeply empathetic and focusing on the people are something that have been foundational to my leadership style, and I embody today.
I love that. Fine. And you've been with Karyopharm for coming up to 3 years now. What key initiatives have you introduced to enhance Karyopharm's culture?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've been with Karyopharm, coming up on 3 years, and I was really hired to work with the CEO, Richard, to help transform the company into a scalable, integrated commercial organization. So I think one of the things coming from a founder-led organization that I focused on was really looking at and taking stock of the culture. So what was working, what wasn't working, and where did we need to evolve? And that led to a full-on cultural assessment, which spawned some very intentional changes to some of the programs that we put in place. And it helped us implement changes to align our culture with the organization's evolving needs and aspirations. So I would say, from the beginning, I've been focusing on evolving the culture to one that really prioritizes, belonging, well-being, performance. And that was done through a number of ways. We introduced an industry-leading, I think it's industry-leading flexibility model, a work model. We refreshed our development programs to focus on the whole person, that were really fit for purpose. We launched several employee resource groups that we never had in the organization before, really bringing people together, creating that inclusivity. And so evolving from that founder-led organization also required several shifts in how we operate. So we aim to create a really empowered, collaborative culture. And so we began also with an initiative to refresh those core values and really helping people to understand what they mean. So they weren't just words on a wall or words on a page. So in practical terms, showing people what it means to live those values here. And while that sounds probably pretty fundamental, it was essential to really grounding our culture and clarifying expectations for how we work together. And at the same time, we identified areas of the business that needed strengthening to ensure we had the necessary capabilities to execute on our core programs. We leveled up in some key functional areas. We made some changes to the leadership team. And as part of a broader and cultural human capital strategy, we revamped our recognition programs to reflect our new ways of working, and our talent programs, as I had mentioned previously. We also did, not all of it has been, a bed of roses. I think in biotech, it's challenging right now. So there are times in the organization where we had to go through a right sizing effort. And so that was challenging and tough, but, it has to be done while navigating challenges. I think what I'm most proud of in the time that I've been here with Karyopharm is the impact that HR has had on the company, and as stewards of the culture, and in partnership, of course, with the executive team, because everybody owns culture, that we were recognized as a most loved workplace from Newsweek magazine and one of Boston Globe's top places to work. So these recognitions really reflect the strength of our culture, as demonstrated in a recent survey that we had, which was 9%, a 9% increase over the previous year. So, culture is really the X factor, and you got to get it right. And I think we're doing pretty well in that regard.
Very good. And you mentioned Richard briefly before. You worked together at Ipsen, now work together at Karyopharm. Can you talk us through the importance of that relationship between Chief Human Resource Officer and the CEO, and also how you'll look to collaborate when looking to bring new talent into the business?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the relationship, it has to be, you have to have the right amount of respect for each other, and to enable those disagreements, the sparring on key issues, and alignment to get to the best outcome for the organization. So if it's not there, then HR effectively becomes an order taker, I think, and that's not a strategic relationship. So I view HR as the truth serum for the organization. HR has knowledge of the people and the dynamics, and can really play a role in influencing those key decisions that ultimately have a huge impact on your culture. So HR can't be just the party planners. They need to have a seat at the table and be able to talk those through. And so you need a CEO that's going to listen to you. Even if you don't agree, you need to get to a place where it's the right decision for the company. when the relationship isn't optimal, I think it's obvious to the organization and your culture will take a hit. So I always partner with Richard when bringing talent into the organization and moves that we've made where we've hired new leaders. It's really just kind of aligning on what the needs are and working together very collaboratively to find the right people that will be successful here.
Yeah, good. I was actually speaking to someone last week about how you don't see too often like chief human resource officers on the board of a company. And I found it a really interesting conversation, like the importance of the role that you guys have. And very rarely do you see a company have someone on the board, which I found a super interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of the core operating team, so I participate in the board meetings and attend the board meetings. And I think that just speaks to how Richard views HR and the importance and the value. So
yeah, fine.
agree.
And you've been on both sides of the fence now. So you've been obviously big pharma HR, you've been small biotech HR. Can you talk us through what you think the major differences are in being a leader in the two different environments in terms of how you think, how you approach people, everything?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, suffice it to say, in small biotech, there's really nowhere to hide, and you don't have a lot of endless amounts of resources at your disposal. So, everyone needs to perform well within the organization. You need to have the right capabilities. You only have so many chess pieces on the board, so to speak. But I think as a leader, you have an opportunity to wear so many different hats in the organization. Like for me, I feel less like a function of HR, even though I represent HR, but really a business leader, being so deeply involved in those business discussions. And in a small biotech, I think you're really connected to the bottom line and the inner workings of an organization in a way that you don't always get to experience in a larger organization. So you have greater visibility to the balance sheet and how you impact that, even as an enabling function and everything that happens within a company. In large pharma, more resources to pull from, decisions tend to be slower. So in biotech, you also are, smaller biotech making decisions much more quickly. So I think it's a much more dynamic environment. The other key distinction I would say is that, as a leader, you get to make decisions, not only quickly, but pretty autonomously. So I know that Richard trusts me to make decisions, and there's not a lot of bureaucracy or red tape to go through. So it's really empowering.
Yeah, I love that. And I think restructuring is a topic that comes up quite a bit, particularly at the moment with the current biotech market. But how do leaders in companies approach restructuring in a way that prioritizes like fairness, empathy when making the decision to let people go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Bottom line is you need to be honest, you need to be open, and you need to communicate more than you think you have to. The other thing is if you're disingenuous and trying to sell a picture or a story, it really damages your credibility and your culture. So that's why, it's really important that you are very open and honest to the extent that you can share. You also need to treat the people who are exiting the organization fairly. There needs to be a selection process. There needs to be criteria, right? But you have to do it with integrity, and you have to do it in the right way, while also not forgetting that your focus should also remain or stay focused on the people who are remaining with the organization. So I've had a lot of experience restructuring at larger organizations, and I kind of made a mental list of practices that I always hated that I had to kind of abide by. And they also don't translate into smaller organizations. For example, in a larger organization, it was never announced, the departing colleagues. There was never a way of saying goodbye. It's like they were just kind of gone. People would get an email bounce back and they didn't know what was going on. And that was always a complaint that we received, but that was always the practice in larger organizations. So when I've had to do it here, made a point of tactfully and gracefully wishing our colleagues well and sharing who are the colleagues who have departed that have, really done a great job and did a lot for the organization. So tried to make it more personable, but it's one step toward being more transparent to the organization. And I think they really appreciate those smaller things.
Yeah, I think one of the beauties of biotech, it's sort of a community in a way. Like when a company goes through a restructuring, often resume books will get passed around to different companies, and it's sort of like a very supportive community when that type of thing happens.
Yeah, I mean, we do all that too, of course, trying to help them, offer them the right benefits, support, transition services. Yeah, I think you have to do all of that.
Yeah, and it's a really difficult time, I think, as a recruiter, that it's worrying how many more messages I seem to get on like a daily basis of people who have been let go. So it's a really interesting time for sure.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. So look, and I think just you mentioned you've done executive search recruitment in some of your businesses before. I know we've never worked together before, but when you do look to collaborate with a recruitment partner, talk us through some of the things that you're looking for in a potential partner.
Yeah, I mean, I always get a lot of calls from recruiters, and I think the ones that really stand out are the recruiters whom I feel can really operate as a true extension of our company and culture. So they take the time to understand the company well, and can be that ambassador and that face, again, as an extension of us, but also, recruiters that are proactive, flexible to work with, because as you just mentioned, tough times. So flexibility is always appreciated. Just easy to work with, who are connected within the life sciences kind of ecosystem and can really deliver the best talent. But it really comes down to, there is a stylistic element. I think, understanding the business is one piece, but the way in which recruiters, work with you, I think, that can really leave an impression and make you want to work with them again for all the reasons I just mentioned.
Yeah, fine. And I think there's been a lot of talk around, like, particularly post-COVID, around like hybrid, remote, on-site. How do you see the future of work evolving in the biotech industry with those three different things?
It's a really interesting question because, I keep pretty connected to, what's going on within industry. And I do think at the moment, there's probably a little bit more of a push to get CEOs want employees back into the office more frequently than, when everyone was full on remote. But I'm also seeing a good mix of companies that still have those flexible work models. So personally, I think that we could never go back to the way it was pre-COVID. I think people got a taste of, working from home, working remotely. They're able to better balance their life with their career. Some people feel a lot more productive, with that flexibility. I think, we've gone to a place at Karyopharm where we're very, very flexible. I mentioned this earlier. Over 60% of our workforce is remote. And we don't really mandate people to come into the office, although we do have these core weeks where people can come in and get together and have in-person, collaboration. But you've got to strike the right balance. I think it comes down to balance between, flexibility and connection, leveraging technology, being human. But I do think that having that flexibility is giving companies an edge into retaining talent and also attracting talent. So as I said, we lean more flexibly than the companies that I'm familiar with. And I think this has really helped us with our, the survey results I spoke about earlier and our culture.
Great. And this is a question that we'll often finish with on the BioHub, but if you could go back in time and give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be and why?
Don't drink too much. Yeah, right. I would say heed every opportunity to learn. Take the roles that you're offered, even if they're not, appealing at first, or you may not be sure. There's always something to learn. Even if the only thing you learn is that you never want to do that again. I think it really expands your thinking and really rounds out your experience set. And I would also say, don't stress about what others think. I know it's easy to say that with some years gone by, but keep challenging yourself to grow, take the risks early on, and don't always think of your career in terms of a linear path. Careers can take unexpected turns. If you're in HR, I highly encourage you to step into a role into the business, because each experience really shapes you, gives you confidence, and as I said, rounds you out.
Brilliant. I love that. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on and helping us out. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. So, yeah, appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was fun.